pass it around. But what I want to take this opportunity over the next few minutes is just kind of get your thoughts on some of the issues that you're seeing, things that you want people in this room. There's actually a couple of elected officials, a couple of candidates in this room as well. What we wanted to hear from you. So Steve is going to take the mic here, and if anybody wants to kind of start us off, that would be great. All right.
I just have a comment. Sure. You know, if the personhood amendment goes through, then all women who smoke when they're pregnant or drink when they're pregnant are guilty of child abuse. That's going to touch fear in the hearts of some people who might otherwise want to support a personhood amendment.
Yeah, no, I think especially when you take a look at personhood, you take a look at the election that just happened, you know, last year, where even in the South, conservative voters turning that down. But it is, again, you know, this kind of push to move this conversation much further than has ever been here, especially here in the state of Michigan.
On a related issue, something that I've been concerned about for a long time, and it's getting more concerned, is doesn't all this make women slaves to a fetus for 9 months? And isn't that prohibited by the Constitution? I'm serious. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Do you know where the governor is on some of these issues? I'm just out of curiosity,
sure,
because he's at least one stopgap measure.
Well, I can't say that I can speak on behalf of the governor or know where the governor is at that. You know, I can tell you the actions that this governor has taken, right? So here's a governor who said he didn't want to work on social issues or pass on social issues, and then the legislature passed a partial birth amendment that wasn't necessary because it's already prohibited by federal law. So it went through the process, and he actually signed it. So again, I think if you've heard his rhetoric, he always talks about being moderate and not wanting to deal with social issues and trying to get back to the economic well-being of the state. You know, I'll be quite critical of a lot of his economic policies as well. But on this issue, he's had a chance to actually veto something and say we're not going to deal with social issues, and he actually signed it. So his rhetoric is much different than, you know, his actions. Now, there's a couple of advocates in this room who probably have had the chance to talk to the governor, or at least might have some more insight on that. But I don't think on many of these issues he's going to be a friendly face on this conversation.
I'm just curious, are some of those conservatives been willing to give health insurance to protect the women all the way through pregnancy and then to protect the child? And I mean, where are they in terms of health and well-being if they're insisting that all women bear every fetus that's conceived?
Again, especially if you look at this on the national level, you know, the question about healthcare, providing healthcare is not part of the conservative values. And again, we're still seeing that same issue here in Michigan, where the question of universal health care, creating the health exchanges, for example, which was kind of that next step, which everyone knows we have to do to be part of this you know, national program. They won't even do that. So there is a definite move on the legislature, both House, Senate, and a number of other groups to not move on any of these issues. And that's one of these reasons why we need to change the legislative makeup. I think there are a number of us who are working across the state trying to get a number of different people elected this time around. 2010 made a significant you know, impact on our ability to have good negotiation, have good conversation around these issues. And 2012 has to change. We're hopeful that with a presidential election, with I think some recruiting of good candidates across the state, and then good work from people in this room, you know, obviously we're going to elect people with values from Okemos, Hazlet, Limson Township, and East Lansing and Lansing. But you know, there's other areas that we also have to focus in on. And so even though I'm obviously campaigning myself for the 69th district, I'm also trying to remind people that there's other districts that we need that to happen, because we need that. You know, we also have a congressman who, again, sounds very moderate when you see him on television, but he decides and where he votes is very different from that. You know, I know we've got a candidate here in the audience as well who's running for against that in the primary, Lance Enderle. But we have to change that dialogue. We have to change this kind of focus so we can begin to have a real conversation about the values that we all have in this community.
Hi, I'd like to hear from some candidates what your arguments would be against the personhood bill. Like, how would you argue that if you get into office?
Well, I think it was very effective, you know, again, when we looked at the this last election cycle, when people looked at personhood. You know, you begin to talk, you know, I think Deb Kanja, who's a trustee at the LCC, mentioned, you know, are simple things like having smoked a cigarette or had a drink while you were pregnant. Is that child abuse? If you do take birth control, and does that now make it against the law because of the personhood? Those were some of the national messages that were being talked about as this, you know, came forward.
So the thing that I think is going on a national level that is the root cause for this attack on women is, if you look at a lot of the press that's been going on, women are performing better in schools, or have more education, or coming out of the colleges and universities with degrees. We own a lot of the money in this country. We make a lot of buying decisions in this country. Women are getting power in this country. There are lots of studies that show when you get women on the boards of companies that the profits go up. There's a lot of stuff going on with women in the economic realm. My theory is that the reason they're attacking women's reproductive rights is the one way to put women back in their place is to take away their ability to control their lives. And then they're not competition for economic stuff. The argument to counter that is that these bills hurt us economically. That if you take these highly talented, creative women out of the workforce, or make it harder for them to compete, you're going to hurt our economic viability as a state. That we need these talented, driven women, and if it's not educated women, if it's poor women who don't have access to health care, the more children they have, the less they're going to be able to take care of them, and that hurts our economic viability too. I think that is a powerful argument to make against this attack on women, because it's about all of our financial, economic health. And it's just a different angle to come at it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think, you know, the issue on pay equity is another kind of component of that. As was mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to run the Michigan Nonprofit Association, and the nonprofit sector, you know, is a more progressive sector. It is also a sector that is predominantly filled with women as workers. And we started to do a study to take a look at, you know, the wages and salaries. And even in the nonprofit sector, we found a discrepancy between men and women executive directors and fund development directors for these nonprofit organizations. Now, it wasn't as drastic as if you look at the for-profit sector here in Michigan, but it was still in the nonprofit sector. And we spent a lot of time trying to educate boards and educate the nonprofits that we were involved with, the 1,100 or so members, to take a look at our salary surveys, to make sure as they were making decisions and hiring people that they were staying within these boundaries. To know that, you know, again, as a sector, we are supposed to be the group that is more progressive on women's issues, LGBT issues, and so forth. And so having had that kind of grounding my whole professional career, and then even when I was in college working for nonprofit organizations, you know, I'm really proud that we were better, but by no means were we there. And so there was still a lot of work that needed to be done. But that's something we need to be, you know, looking at. Again, Pay Equity Day, as Rebecca mentioned, was on April 17th. And again, you know, we had people talking about repealing Pay Equity Act that was passed 2 years ago. Again, we had a Republican senatorial candidate call that act a nuisance for businesses. And so we do need to have that kind of conversation, and it's an economic conversation. We've got less money in the state of Michigan to go to our businesses because we're not paying women what they deserve. And so to me, it's an issue that is, I think you're very much correct that the economic arguments need to be made about this.